Today, we're going to tell the story of David, a man who made the fatal decision to stay home as a Category 5 hurricane, Hurricane Milton, approached the Florida coast. This story is not just fiction, it's a harsh reminder of the dangers of staying behind when authorities tell you to evacuate. David had a plan, he thought he was prepared, and he believed his house, equipped with a bunker, would protect him. But the storm had other plans. This video is meant to save lives. Don't make the same mistake. David had lived through many hurricanes in Florida, always refusing to evacuate. Each storm, he stayed in his house, which he had reinforced over the years. His roof was fortified, his windows had hurricane shutters, and recently, he had installed a bunker last resort, an underground refuge where he thought he would be safe from anything. When the news about Hurricane Milton came in, David didn't flinch. Even though it was a Category 5, the highest possible rating, he was confident. "My house is stronger than any storm," he told himself. His bunker was stocked with supplies, food, water, first aid, and a backup generator. He thought he could outlast any storm that came his way. David's family called, urging him to leave. They begged him to evacuate, telling him the storm was different. But David stood firm. "I'll be fine. I've been through worse," he said, as he watched his neighbors pack up their cars and head inland. The day before Hurricane Milton was due to hit, the skies were deceptively calm. David watched from his porch as the last few neighbors evacuated, leaving the street eerily empty. He felt a sense of peace, almost a smug satisfaction. He had survived before, and he would survive again. But the storm was closing in. As the hours ticked by, the wind began to pick up. The once calm sky turned an ominous shade of gray. David moved inside, locking the doors, sealing the windows with his hurricane shutters, and preparing to ride out the storm. He felt safe in his fortress, but he couldn't have been more wrong. By the evening, the winds were howling like an angry beast. The entire house groaned under the pressure. David sat in his living room, trying to ignore the noise, the shaking, and the occasional banging from objects crashing into his house. He checked the news again. Winds of 180 miles per hour. Storm surges over 20 feet. It was worse than anything he had imagined. Suddenly, there was a loud crack. He jumped up and ran to check. The massive oak tree in his yard, the one he thought would withstand anything, had been snapped in half like a twig and was now leaning dangerously close to his house. The power flickered, then went out completely. The hum of his generator filled the silence for a moment, but the storm roared louder. David decided it was time to retreat to the bunker. His house, reinforced as it was, didn't feel so indestructible anymore. He grabbed his emergency kit, flashlight, and some blankets, then headed to the small door leading to the underground bunker he had built for situations just like this. The wind was slamming against the walls with such force it felt like the whole house might come down. The storm was getting worse. Debris was hitting the house from every direction, and David could hear parts of his roof being ripped away. He reached the bunker, opened the heavy door, and descended the stairs into the cold, reinforced room below. Down there, he felt a sense of relief. He was safe, or so he thought. The storm raged on for hours, but eventually, there was silence. The wind stopped, the howling ceased, and everything became eerily quiet. David knew this wasn't the end, it was the eye of the storm. He opened the door to the bunker and cautiously climbed the stairs. When he reached the top, he couldn't believe what he saw. His house, his fortress, was destroyed. The roof was gone, windows shattered. His car was overturned and submerged in water. His once familiar neighborhood was now an apocalyptic wasteland. The floodwaters were rising fast. He had minutes before the second half of the storm would hit, and with it, the surge of water would only get worse. He had no choice but to return to the bunker. David sealed himself back inside the bunker, but as the second half of the storm hit, the situation became more dire. The wind was even more powerful, coming from the opposite direction. The ground above shook violently, and then, he noticed something terrifying. Water was seeping into the bunker. At first, it was just a small trickle, but within minutes, the trickle became a flood. The storm surge had overwhelmed his house and was now pouring into his so-called safe space. David scrambled to find something, anything to stop the water, but it was futile. The water continued to rise, inch by inch, flooding the floor. He climbed onto a small ledge, but the water showed no signs of stopping. As the hours dragged on, David was trapped. The water kept rising, and soon it was waist deep. His flashlight flickered as the generator, overwhelmed by the flooding, finally died. He was alone in the dark, water creeping higher, cold and unforgiving. He banged on the walls, screamed for help, but no one could hear him. The winds outside howled, the house above him crumbled, and the floodwaters showed no mercy. David's fortress, his bunker, was now a tomb. As the water reached his chest, then his neck, panic fully set in. There was nowhere to go. The rising floodwaters pressed in from all sides, leaving David with no escape. He thought of his family, the ones who had begged him to leave, the ones he had reassured so many times that he would be okay. But he wasn't okay. His decision to stay had sealed his fate. In those final moments, as the water closed over his head, David realized the terrible truth. No house, no bunker, no amount of preparation could have saved him from the wrath of a storm like Milton. The morning after the storm, rescue teams finally made their way into David's neighborhood. They found devastation: entire blocks reduced to rubble, houses flattened, streets turned into rivers. When they reached David's home, or what was left of it, they found the bunker flooded, the door broken off, and inside, David's lifeless body. He hadn't made it. The storm had claimed yet another victim. David's death was preventable. He didn't have to stay. He didn't have to face the storm, but like so many others, he underestimated the power of nature, and it cost him his life. David's story is a tragic reminder that no amount of preparation can protect you from the full force of a Category 5 hurricane. Even a bunker, designed to withstand extreme conditions, couldn't save him from the rising floodwaters and the storm surge. If there's one thing you should take from this story, it's this: do not stay behind during a Category 5 hurricane. Evacuation orders are given for a reason. They're not just suggestions, they're life-saving directives. No structure, no matter how strong, can stand against the combined force of 180-mile-per-hour winds, storm surges, and the unpredictable power of a hurricane. Houses can be rebuilt, possessions can be replaced, but once a life is lost, it's gone forever. If you're ever in the path of a hurricane, here are some vital tips that could save your life. Listen to authorities and evacuate when told to do so. No matter how well prepared you think you are, evacuation is your safest option. Have an emergency plan in place. Know where you'll go, and leave early to avoid the rush. Prepare a go bag with essential items, medications, important documents, water, food, and a flashlight. Never rely on a bunker to save you from flooding. Floodwaters are the deadliest part of a hurricane and can overwhelm any underground shelter. Avoid high-risk areas, especially if you're near the coast. Storm surges can flood areas miles inland. Stay informed. Follow news updates and weather reports closely before, during, and after the storm. Conclusion: David didn't survive, and the truth is, many who stay behind during a storm like Hurricane Milton won't survive either. It's not about bravery. It's not about toughness. It's about making the smart, safe decision to leave when you can. Don't risk your life. Evacuate when the warnings come, and live to tell the story after the storm has passed. Be smart and be safe.